Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. Today, I want to talk about the illusion that alcohol gives people more confidence. It reduces inhibition, and some of the misconceptions around that. Because certainly it seems like that's the case. And certainly people do things while they're inebriated that they likely wouldn't do otherwise, especially when it comes to promiscuous behavior, risky behavior, things like that. So I'm not denying that at all. But for people who are habitual drinkers of alcohol, for people like me who started out in a position where it was used as a social lubricant, where it made socializing with people a little bit easier, where it made us feel more confident in situations where we normally felt awkward, alcohol use actually ends up causing more problems than it solves. And author Annie Grace puts this in a very good way in her book, This Naked Mind. I want to read a section from it right now where she talks about this. She says, "I was convinced drinking gave me confidence. I now realize alcohol actually chipped away at my confidence. In this day and age, most true danger has been eliminated from our daily lives. We live longer than ever before. We are not under attack by neighboring tribes or wild animals. We go to the grocery store rather than hunting for food. As a result, we regard fear as weakness, when in reality, fear allows us to exercise caution and make better decisions. We protect ourselves because of fear. Considering that fear is key to our survival, calling someone fearless doesn't seem like much of a compliment. It is good for us to feel fear. It prevents us from taking unnecessary risks. With adrenaline pumping through our bodies, we are more alert and responsive and can make faster decisions. Alcohol numbs your senses and prevents you from feeling natural fear. It's not possible for alcohol to give you courage because, by definition, if you've numb feelings of fear, you cannot be courageous. Courage means doing what is right or just despite your fear. Ignoring or disregarding your fear goes against your instincts, which ensure your survival." So this really made a lot of sense to me, because when I went into social situations, it was in college when I first really began using alcohol to help me feel less awkward in social situations. And when I did that, I felt more courageous. I felt more willing to go talk to people. I felt more outgoing, and I felt like that, I was the life of the party. It was great. But what was really happening wasn't that I was getting more courage. It was just that the fear was dampened a little bit. And so what I've observed since I have come into recovery is that, unfortunately for me, I did not learn a lot of the social skills that some other people learned to deal with the kind of fear and awkwardness that happens in social situations. And so I've had to start to relearn some of those skills. I've had to start to explore, how do I get over the fear of rejection by other people? How do I get over that fear so that I can walk into a room full of strangers and strike up a conversation with somebody? And so it's been really important for me to acknowledge that alcohol wasn't the source of courage for me. It was a way of anesthetizing the fear that I have. And a big part of my recovery has been addressing fear in my life. In fact, if you work a 12-step program of recovery like AA, you spend a lot of time talking about your fears and addressing your fears. And you spend a lot of time recognizing where you're fearful in life and then figuring out how you cope with that fear to do what's right anyway. Like what Annie says here. She says, courage means doing what is right or just despite your fear. And that's what the program of AA has really taught me, is okay, once I recognize that I'm doing something out of fear, how do I adjust so that instead of reacting to my fear, I can react based on what I know is the right thing to do? Great example is the example of giving a speech in front of a lot of people. And she gives a really, really good example on this. I'm going to read what she says. She says, "I get nervous every time I speak in public. Lately, I've needed to speak more in front of senior colleagues. I can't recall exactly when, but somewhere along the line, I figured that since alcohol relaxed me, a quick drink before a speech would help me. I would stop at the hotel bar to buy a 4-pack of single-serving wine bottles, keeping a few in my purse. So what's wrong with numbing my fear before a presentation? My natural nerves spurred me to prepare. They ensured I wasn't complacent and drove me to rehearse and plan. When I began to rely on alcohol to dampen my fear, I stopped preparing in advance. Instead, I stayed up late, drinking the night before and putting off my rehearsals. Preparation made me a good public speaker, but once I started drugging myself with alcohol, knowing I wasn't prepared, my nerves skyrocketed. I actually worsened my fear by drinking, and so I felt I needed a few swigs before I stepped on stage. As you can guess, my speeches got worse." So that's something that I've dealt with a lot as well. I enjoy public speaking. And when I get done speaking, a lot of times people say, "Well, how do you do that without getting nervous?" And my response is always, I'm typically incredibly nervous prior to a speech and during a speech and in the days leading up to a speech. And it's often very, very unpleasant to feel those nerves. But those nerves are important. They spur me to do, like Annie says here, they spur me to prepare for a speech. They spur me to do things like get a good night's sleep beforehand, to practice in front of other people, to let other people critique me, give their feedback. And so I can use those nerves to my advantage. And in fact, having those nerves actually gives me the little bit of adrenaline that I need to then perform when I get up in front of people. And so that fear becomes important, not that I want to succumb to that fear by then saying, well, never mind, I'm not going to do this speech, but by actually using it to help me. And by acknowledging its presence and not running from the fear. And in a sense, that's what we were doing with alcohol, is we were using alcohol as our getaway car to run from the fear. Instead of coping with the fear of going into a crowded room and potentially being awkward and making a fool of myself by saying something that someone didn't appreciate, I just used alcohol to help me get rid of that fear, and to tamp that fear down. And what happened was I never learned the art of striking up a conversation with someone that I've never met before. I never learned how to be interested in other people, because all I did was walk into a room and look for the other people who drank the same way I did, and then hung out with them, because they were likely doing the same thing. They were drinking to run away from their fears, and naturally we had stuff to talk about. But learning how to actually have conversations with other people and to be interested with other people, that was the key to overcoming the fear of stepping into that crowded room of strangers. And that's the kind of thing I've had to learn how to do in recovery. And fortunately, I've been able to do that in recovery, and by doing so have met some of the most and become involved with some of the most fascinating people in the world. But I never would have done that had I continued to numb my fears using alcohol. That's it for today. I'll be back here tomorrow with more. Have a good one.